My name is Stacy Rogers. I am a Local 10 member, an executive board member as well. Very grateful to have with us a guest from South Africa, from the largest Metalworkers union in South Africa, Mr. Brother Dinga Sikwebu. Thank you. And talk about what's going on in South Africa and their union issues and building a united front. So welcome.
Good evening to everyone, and thanks for coming. South Africa is very, very far from here. And I would like to thank Sister Stacy because our history has shown that things move if you have strong women at the forefront. This is not, I'm not saying this to patronize you. The history of the struggle against apartheid, if it wasn't for the women who were at the forefront of that, wouldn't have led to what it led to. So, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. The second thing I want to say is thank you to the organizers of this meeting. And this union has a history of taking up issues that not just go beyond the sort of factory issues, but that go beyond borders. And to do that and move from a factory into a community issue, into issues across borders, shows high levels of consciousness. And if people can do that, my feeling is that we can move mountains. What has kept the working class is that sometimes we are concerned about the gumboots and the overalls and don't care about what happens in the community. We don't care about what happens in another country. And I think what I've seen in the last few minutes is an example of what we can do as NUMSA. I know everyone is talking about NUMSA, but there are things that we as a union are prepared to learn. And I was saying to comrades that our work on Palestine as a union is very weak. And I think if we're going to partner and do something, it will be important for an exchange about what you have been doing so that in the consciousness of our union, the issue can be taken up as an important issue. Now let me just say, because I have a clip that I want to show, because I prefer this to be a discussion than someone like talking. As Stacy said, my name is Dinga Sikwebu. Dinga is a word for promise, which my parents gave to me, and Sikwebu is a millicorp, which is the staple diet in South Africa. So it's a promise, and it's something about the future and what is stable. And I am involved with the National Union of Metalworkers. I've been with the union since 1978, and I've been the head of what is called in the States the Director of Education since 1995. What I want to say is that we would want to congratulate this local for the action that it took on police brutality. When Steve was in South Africa and he told us that there was going to be action on May Day, we thought it was important to issue a statement in support of the action that was being taken here. But statements are not good enough. They are necessary, but they're not good enough. And for 3 Mondays in a row, we, as NUMSA and our allies in the communities, went to petition, picket outside the U.S. consulate in Johannesburg. And like many people in the States, we said that Black Lives Matter. In the US, in South Africa, in Sudan, in Libya, Black Lives Matter. And that the police brutality that we are seeing in the US is something that we have seen in South Africa in the past, and it's something that we have seen recently with the killing on the 16th of August of 34 miners being shot by police in South Africa, what is called the Marikana massacre. So we know what police brutality is all about. Our statement, which we sent to you, we felt as a union, we can't say that, like other people are saying, that the chicken are coming home to roost. That's not an internationalist perspective. Because we know that US guns, that US military has been killing people in different parts of the world. That the dispersion that we see all over the world has been because of the US imperial and military power. But it's not you. It's the ruling class that does that. And our solidarity must be with the people who are at the receiving end. And it is for that reason we send the statement that you should be strong on this, and we will continue to picket outside the US consulate. Now, let me just say something. The National Union of Metalworkers, NUMSA, is the biggest union in South Africa. We have now, see here people say 350, we have 364,000 and about 489 members. We are the biggest union in South Africa and on the African continent.
Yeah.
And as a union, we had sort of taken up decisions that have made us very unpopular in some circles. In August 2012, 34 mine workers were shot outside a town called Marikana for demanding higher wages. And the ANC and the Communist Party said, this is no time for point scoring, for blame. This is not a massacre, it's a tragedy and a mistake. And our union came out and said, look, what we have here is the first post-apartheid massacre. And that what this shows is that the liberation movement that we sang about, we fought for, we died for, has become an organization in the pocket of the capitalists. The second thing that our union said is that that organization called the South African Communist Party, which we were allied to, together with the ANC through COSATU, has become embedded in the state. Half of its central committee are members of cabinet. So, as my mother, late mother would say, if you sleep with the dogs, you rise with the fleas. And this is what has happened to the glorious movements in our country. And because of this position that we took about this Marikana, we took around a movie and showed it to workers. And whenever we showed to workers, the workers asked a question. How can you say that we must vote for this party that kills workers in a cold-blooded manner? And to cut a long story, we had a special national congress. We have our national congresses every 4 years. And the last one we had was in June 2012. And because of what had happened in Marikana, our union leadership decided that we should have a special congress to analyze the situation. And yes, we did have a special national congress in December 2013. And I'll just say what we decided in that. And then I'll let the General Secretary of the Union speak, and then we can have a discussion. The first thing that the NUMSA Workers' Parliament decided is that no more will we as a union support a political party that kills workers. In the 2014 national elections that were coming, NUMSA will not support the African National Congress. Now we have union cards. I don't know you guys. We said even to officials, those cards have trackers. We will be able to trace if you go and campaign for the ANC. Put the union car aside and do it in your own time. We are not supporting the ANC. The second thing that we resolved is that as a union, we will go to the Congress of South African Trade Unions, which is our AFL-CIO, and say to them, break this bloody alliance with the ANC and the Communist Party. I don't know what you call it in that. We have a vernacular word of something that people claim exists, but does not exist. It's called a chimera utikolosh. We said this alliance does not exist. It's just there for elections. Before elections, the alliance gets revived between the ANC and the Communist Party, and that we were tired of lying to our members who before election, like a balloon, some air is put into the alliance and we think it functions. After that, there is no alliance after that. So we said, secondly, the alliance must be broken. The third thing that we said is that, when you get closer to the ruling party, it gets warm and comfortable, and you get all the perks. And this is what has happened. And I know some people here would say, why did it happen? And I have got a metaphorical answer that you must remember. You can plant an apple tree on the 21st of May, but the apples on that tree will never get ripe at the same time. Yes, we have supported the ANC since 1994. But we have reached a point where we say that we can no longer lie to our members. We can no longer face our members in the face and say that this ANC is delivering. So the third thing, besides saying that let's break with COSATU, let's not vote or support the ANC in the vote, we said that there were people there that were struggling. There were communities, there were social movements. And it was important to bring struggles on the factory floor, struggles of workers, and struggles of communities. And the idea of a united front came from this. And we agreed that NUMSA must lead in South Africa in the establishment of a united front that will bring unions and social community movement, women's groups, rural groups, youth, students, LGBTI organization into one formidable force. And I can say here that this united front, this coalition, will be launched on the, put it down, 25, 26, 27 of June in Johannesburg, and it will end with a rally on the 28th, which is Sunday, which we are clear we are not bringing into that rally less than 20,000 people. Whoa. So we are moving with the idea of the united front. The fourth thing that we said we're going to do is that workers, there's my comrade, workers do need a political voice. They do need a political representation of their own. For too long, workers, their organization, have been tailed to bourgeois parties. They follow these bourgeois parties. And that it was high time that as a union, we should explore the establishment of what we call a movement for socialism. And we've set a long process of researching of what should the form of this movement for socialism, what should be its policies be, what should be its organizational program be, and we are busy with that work. And workers, not me, officials, have been crisscrossing the world, speaking to workers in Venezuela, in Brazil, in Greece, Syriza, talking about how do you fashion an instrument that will not turn against workers. Because we've seen in the 20th century a lot of initiatives where people turn up against workers. The last thing which may be interesting for you as workers is that in COSATU, we are organized as industrial unions. So, longshore, metal workers, textile workers. We said that the nature of capitalism has changed that. The idea of industrial unionism in the narrow sense is no more, because what capitalism does is that you may work in a steel mill and they outsource you and say you are a cleaner. And because you're now a cleaner, you get a lower rate and you must go to the cleaning workers union. We said no, we are not just a craft union. We will organize every worker who is in a steel mill is a metal worker. The idea of industrial unions in modern 21st century doesn't work. And let me just give you another example. We organize, you don't have it here in the US, we have 40,000 people who put gasoline in the car. And we fought against any automation of petrol stations, because that's for us was important job creation. So we've got all these members, but they're organized by NUMSA. But the people who bring the petrol are organized by the Chemical Workers Union. The people in the refinery are organized by another union. So we said, no. Bargaining times are different. bargaining units are different. It is important for the working class to organize a long value chain. Right from where the crude arrives on the docks, through the refinery, through the wholesalers, right into retail. And we will go right up and organize in this manner. And in this way, workers can have power and they can go out and strike at the same time without being fragmented. Now you are clapping for all of these reasons that we took. But let me tell you, these 5 reasons led to our expulsion from COSATU. Expulsion. On the 8th of November, the night of the long knives began. A meeting started at 9, and 1 o'clock it was announced, a vote was taken, that more than 360,000 members, for taking these reasons, were being expelled from COSATU. And this is a federation and a movement that we as metal workers had built. So we are out in the cold. We have been expelled from COSATU. And this was followed by the dismissal of the General Secretary of COSATU, who, I'm sure you've heard things about sex scandals and sex what in the office, decided that he will not support the expulsion of more than 360,000 members. And for that reason, he was expelled. Vavi is no more the General Secretary of COSATU. So the South African labor movement that we built through blood and sweat is de facto split. And no unionist here can rejoice at the split of union because the beneficiaries are always the employers. But it is a fact that for the first time in this year, in COSATU's 30 years of existence, we've had 2 May Days. Because in COSATU, which has 22 affiliates, there are 13 affiliates that said NUMSA must go, and there are 8 other unions who said that we are standing by NUMSA. And those unions have decided not to participate in COSATU until NUMSA is reinstated. So what you have, you've got 13 versus 9 unions. And we are taking this forward, this fight forward. Where it's going to end, it's not very clear. But one thing from our union is that the 5 resolutions that we took, which we had a mandate from our members, there is no turning back from those resolutions. COSATU must take us back with those resolutions as we had taken them. Because to change them, it means going to all the factories, canvassing those workers and changing them. So that's where we are now. And I'm sure I can take some questions on the United Front. But we have a clip here that's very short, where the General Secretary was talking about what was happening just before the Congress. Just before the Congress. We do have another DVD about the Congress and the outcomes of that. I've also brought a DVD on Marikana for other time, not tonight, for another time to look at what exactly had happened, where workers were entrapped, basically entrapped and shot. And this was a clear collusion between the employers, which is a British multinational corporation, the ANC politicians who have shares in those companies, and the police. My Catholic background, although and we used to say, the last will be the first, and the first will be the last. So I'll start with the last question. Let's, Steve, talk about, I'll start with the privatization and I'll be quick. The privatization in South Africa was started before the democratic breakthrough, the elections in 1994. When apartheid saw that they were coming, their reign was coming to an end, the first thing they wanted to do was to sell their family silver. And this was fought very hard. When the ANC came into power, it wanted to continue with the program of privatization. And in 2002, we had 2 3-day general strikes to oppose privatization. So the electricity utility in South Africa is still owned by the state. The transport network is owned by the state. There are about 8 major utilities that were about to be privatized, which we defeated the ANC government from privatizing. There's been some deregulation. The problem that we face in South Africa is not privatization, is how state-owned enterprises act like private companies. They are supposed to be owned by people. They are supposed to deliver services, but they're chasing bottom lines. We have today the issue of the electricity utility, which is called Eskom, pushing up the issue of electricity tariffs. And I will share with you the photos. Yesterday, for the last 5 years, the electricity price in South Africa, compounded, has increased by 252. They are asking for 2015-2016 for a 25.3 increase, which means that ordinary people cannot afford electricity. And this is in the middle of winter. So yesterday we had a night vigil in Soweto where we sat under a slogan, imagine a winter with no power, fix the electricity crisis. And the grannies and the aunties and the women who the load shedding would affect were in this meeting, and we said we'll do it outside, candlelight, as a symbolic way that load shedding, blackouts must be fought. And we are having a big conference on the 2nd to the 5th to define a campaign to fight the blackouts. So privatization, yes, there's deregulation and all of that. The second question of yours, Steve, and I know in the union movement, we never finish this question. Those you don't finish, you finish in the pub. That's now the second question, Steve, was about what happens in the U.S. I am someone who believes in internationalism, but each country, each section of the working class must find its own solutions. When I say that, I'm not saying it's not important. There are things that are clear to me, that this ping ball that happens here between the Republicans and the Democrats is not helping the working class.
Thank you.
It's not helping the working class. You are just about to get into another ping ball game. And I was whilst I've been here reading all these newspapers. And when you listen sometimes, you wonder now, what's the difference between these? So, I think you, as the working class here, must decide how you're going to do this. I know it's not easy. It's a big country. The level of unionism are not as high. And you have a history of struggle, but you also have a history where the left intestines of the labor movement have been taken out. The McCarthy laws, you had a good tradition, the emergence of the CIO in the 30s, and we know what happened. And unless a movement is built, and we were observing things here about what the unions were doing, what Occupy was doing, and all of that, it's clear to us that there is widespread anger in the States. How do you nurture that? How do you build that forward? It's a challenge that we have. Now I know I'm going to trample on some toes. Let's not pretend as the left that we have solutions. I always say there are those who have what I call the ever-ready battery. They have a formula about how things can be done. And we are in this exploration is that some of this we must discover. We as a union haven't worked with social movements. And we're learning how to work with them. They haven't worked with unions, and they are also beginning to learn with unions. And it's through this process of self-discovery. If politics was easy, was about quoting what happened 70 years ago, 80 years ago, then the solutions will be over. So, I don't want to get into that, but I think it is important for the working class to do that. The comrade who was announcing the issue about Peru, I would like to have more details. Puerto Rico. I would like her to have more details about that. And as I said, we have a central national executive committee. So if I can have what's happening there. Again, sometimes we're far away, but sometimes a message of support can make you feel that you are not alone. So if you can give me about that. Now you have a big debate about, let me be quick, you had a point about the issue of a popular front and the question of a sort of independent and all of that. Yeah, now as I said, our resolution as NUMSA is that we are doing two things, side by side. That's what the resolution. On one hand, we are building not a popular front, a united front of working class organizations. Secondly, we are exploring the question of a party. Now, I know the debates, going back to the Comintern resolution of 1922, 35, and all, I know all of that stuff about the popular front and all of that. So I know it. But our view is that even, I haven't seen them speak, that socialist ideas find ground to germinate if there is a mass movement. If you sit in a small group, you talk, you refine a program, and you want a program that's perfect and all of that, but there is no audience, people to listen. Socialist ideas begin to have echo, resonance, if there's a movement. Which is why for us, the question of building a united front and a fighting organ is important, and it's a basis for what we want to do about building a different political alternative. Now, sometimes we get criticized, you're building United Front, this is Popular Front, the shortcut is a party and all that. Let me just tell you, I've been around for, I'm younger, but I've been around for a long time. There are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts and no cut and paste solutions. The only thing is that workers must be mobilized, they must fight, and when they fight, let me just say, as Lenin says, you can sit here and run a workshop about the relationship between the state and the bourgeoisie. But the most impact of the relationship between the state and the police is when the police come and break a strike. For the workers, it becomes clear which side the police stand in. Hundreds of workshops are important, but they cannot replace that experiential learning. And therefore, the question of struggle for us is important and fundamental. Talk, many papers, producing programs, it's important, but it cannot replace the real movement, Okay. The last one was the question. I know this is, I saw some comrades with a Spartakist newspaper. We do have them at home, the Sparts. And we have, I can see the Workers' Vanguard here, and there's a big debate about the Sparts. Kick the police out of the unions. Is that, the Sparts, that's CLI. We do have a police union. Organized. It's one of the unions that kicked out NUMSA. It's a part of the 5 big unions in South Africa. We also have a union of soldiers, defense force. We went to court to fight that soldiers are workers, and we won them. I don't want to get into a big political discussion. Our view is quite simple. And this is what we said with police brutality. As we're having a campaign, we had a campaign. On the posters to the consulate, our message was say that up to now, the US guns have been killing people all over the world. Now they are killing their youth. For us, the message was simple. You, police, don't turn your guns on striking workers because you have problems yourselves. Turn the guns on our enemies. And what we're saying is that when it comes to the issue, and this may not be an immediate issue, when it comes to the crunch in any revolution, the question on which side, and this is not me now being sexist, Lenin said, the question of where that body of armed men will stand, which side would they be, is important. And therefore the political work in the army and the police was important. We formed Bob Crew. We formed the police union. We formed the defense unions against the thing that they shouldn't unionize, and we brought them into COSATU. The fact that, I can see you shaking your head, the fact that they've now become on the other side, including the other unions that have dismissed NUMSA, our position is clear. Our fight is not with the ordinary workers of those unions who dismissed us. Those are our class brothers and sisters. We've got to reach to them. Our fight is with the bureaucrats who sat as 31 people and expelled 360,000 workers. And at every opportunity, we want to reach them. And it is the same with the question of the police union. The civil servants now have just, were demanding 15% increase. They've settled at 7%, betrayal by their leaders. Since they started that fight, although they've expelled us, we've supported their fight. When they march, we march with them. Because the idea is to win them over. I think maybe let me say amen for this round. I think if I maybe let me start about the point about socialism and nationalism. Our viewpoint as a union is that, and this is from when we were formed. NUMSA goes back to 1973, and it was a result of a spontaneous uprising of workers in Durban who said no more. And these metalworkers were formed around the country, and they merged to form a National Union of Metalworkers in 1987. But our roots go back to 73. And when we were formed in 1987, May 22nd, we couldn't in the constitution say that we are socialist, because under apartheid, any furthering of communism was illegal. You could go to jail. So we had to find a clever way of saying that we are socialists. And our view was very clear, that the absence of political rights and the struggle to win political rights in South Africa cannot be won from ending economic exploitation. The absence of democracy and the economic exploitation, which is like capitalism, were two sides of the bloody same coin. And when we put our logo, we send them to the registrar, which is the government, and the registrar saw the red star. Said, oh, this is communism. So what we did was to take the map of Africa, put it in front, and the star was behind. And the stupid registrar thought, okay, that's not communism. But after the unpenning and the scrapping of the Suppression of Communism Act, we brought the red star forward. So the union has always believed that the solution is socialism. It's a different economic system. The system where few people own private property is not the solution. Mm-hmm. So we believe in that, and we believe in workers' control of production, mm-hmm. planning. That's socialism. Socialism. Now, I think what maybe you didn't, or maybe, is that in that the General Secretary of the Union was talking about nationalization. And by nationalization, he meant that you see in South Africa, 90% of platinum, I'm just making it up, the deposits are in South Africa. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't have all these cars I see here with catalytic converters. Right. You get the platinum from us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But those are owned by multinational corporations. Right. And the worst part is that while you put a catalytic converter in a car that goes to the US and the Western Europe, the car that gets sold in South Africa doesn't have to have a catalytic converter. It pollutes the air. Wow. Yeah, okay. Okay. So basically, what the argument has been is that we must take over what we call the strategic minerals, so that they don't belong to individuals. Right. That's what nationalization is. Okay. And that we should do that nationalization not in the same way that it was done before. It should be done under workers' control, because we do have a state ownership, and state ownership and without workers' control will lead to what we have with ESCOM. That's the electricity utility. Yeah. It's owned by the state, the bureaucrats get people on the board,
Right.
they do their own thing and all of that. So what Comrade Ivan Jim was talking about was a question of, and the ANC in 1955, when it adopted the Freedom Charter, had put this as a central plank of its policy, that it will nationalize when it comes into office. And then when it came into 1990, and then we had Big English, and we had case by case, as evidence would show, and all of that. And our view is that when we say that nationalization, it means that we've got to go back to that policy under present circumstances, under workers' control, under public and democratic control. I think that's the nationalization that Comrade Jean was talking about. The thing about what are we doing? There is what I call a de facto split in COSATU, which is in the unions, which is unfortunate. But our union is calling that for a split from the ANC. The ANC is the ruling party. It is the governing party. I don't know, they're complicated, the Republicans, the Democrats, but it rules the country. And it has a 62% majority in the last election. And since 1990, the unions have been in a formal alliance with the ANC, meaning we support the ANC, we go out, we canvass people to vote for the ANC. There's a slogan that the working class must swallow, it must swell the ranks of the ANC, meaning it must make the ANC working class. Our members said, hey man, we've been trying to swell this thing. We've become swallowed in it, man. Right. So there's no point of going back, because the way the ANC has become, it's become very undemocratic. It doesn't function as a democratic organization. But also, many of the people who fought for liberation have become big shareholders in multinational corporations. There's something in South Africa called black economic empowerment. I take Stacy and I say, look, you get 9% in a white company, and this company now is a black economic empowered, and many of the politically connected people have been, including some former unionists, have been part of this. And Cyril Ramaphosa, if you see, have all been included in some of this. And this is the leading cadre of the ANC, that they are sitting within the system of capitalism. And when we say ban atypical work, ban labor brokers, they are the people who are employing labor brokers. They won't do that because their interests have changed. So we want to separate from that, and we say that a time for a new chapter has arrived. There was a comrade who said, what do we mean about the union? Let me start about the movement for socialism. I do think that the experience of the working class, let me be quick, has been that if you start an electoral machine, the system will swallow you. Because you'll go into parliament and you'll do that and the rules there. And so the movement for socialism that we're talking about, the working class has an interest in elections and state power. The reason why we're calling this a movement for socialism, we do think that we need in the 21st century a party of a special type, a party that contests elections but also fights in the streets. Because what happens and separates is that you have people who come from the working class, and we've seen this. They come out of the working class, they become MPs, and we, as we always say, is that the world inside the BMW is different from the from outside. So we don't want what we want to. That's why we're exploring these models. We don't want a party that every 5 years you vote and then the people run. No, we want a movement for socialism. We want a party of a special type, and that's what we are exploring. The question about the United Front and all of that, our view, and this is a big debate, there are those on the left or far left who think that the United Front must be socialist and all of that. To us, the United Front is a coalition of struggle against neoliberalism. So there may be environmental groups, there may be women's groups, there may be people who are fighting over land, and it's got principles of against inequality, egalitarian society, and all of that. And we as NUMSA don't think that in the United Front we should make the question of socialism a precondition.
Cooperative society.
We shouldn't put that as a precondition. Now, I know this is a big debate in South Africa, but let me tell now some of the thoughts in the room. That the transitional method works in this way. You start at the level of consciousness of where people are at. And in the course of struggle, as the people struggle, they begin to understand the lack of housing and how that is linked to capitalism. The lack of unemployment, how that is linked to capitalism. And we are hoping that through struggle, people will graduate to understand how the system works. If you start with the thing about, socialist, and I'm talking the United Front, not the movement for socialism. If you start about that, you will remain a small group, a sect, maybe with a good newspaper, but with no people.
Yeah.
Revolutions are made by people.
Right.
Change is made by people. So we are very clear that we want to build a broad front, not popular, but a broad front that will involve every... South Africa, let me just tell you, has become the most unequal society in the world. If you use now Gini coefficient, if you use assets and all of that, very unequal society. We don't beat Brazil in soccer, but we've been able to beat them to be an unequal society. We're number one. So, this question of inequality in South Africa is an issue that we think we can mobilize. And the second thing about South Africa is that despite all the demobilization, we are the capital of protest. I mean, the people who do indications, every day in South Africa, there's a community somewhere that's on protest. And protesting, fighting about something, water, electricity, this, that. There's the Steve. Now, Cosme, you were there. On your first day there, you had 20,000 people in the streets. People are fighting. What has not happened is that we haven't been able to bring labor and the community that's fighting. And we are hoping that through the United Front we can bring and weld this movement and build a new mass movement. There's the others, John, were more comments. I wasn't sure about the thing about the immigrants. Maybe we can talk about it, about that. I wasn't sure about attacks on immigrants or tax on immigrants. I didn't get that. But we do have a big problem in South Africa, and I'm sure you've seen it, about xenophobia, where particularly directed at our African brothers and sisters. In 2008, 68 people were killed by working class people. Recently, we've had 7 people killed. And as a United Front, we've been involved in trying to, how do we address this question. It's not an easy question. We would like to talk, you know, I was talking to people in LA. I was talking to people in LA about how they organize people in a context of diversity. It's a long issue, but it is. I think it will be dishonest for me not to say that we do have this challenge. Clearly, what's happening is that capital is at the source of this, because people who come over from Zimbabwe, from Malawi, they follow the wealth that's in South Africa. Yeah. And as we know that capital knows no borders, but we put borders for ordinary people. And the people who made these borders met in Germany and decided, hub, Africa this way, hub, and they divided in that way. So we are not responsible for the divisions of Africa. And people flock across this, and they follow where wealth is. And in a context, and this is not a justification, in a context where people are not having jobs and all of that, the working class, sometimes not organized, always look for the weakest next to him or her. Yeah. And we've turned on our own people. And we've got to find a way of turning this up. The ANC government hasn't made this easy because of its immigration policies. And I don't want to say the ANC Women's League owns the deportation center. This is part of its black economic empowerment. So if you take people from Zimbabwe and put them there, the many days they spend at Lindela, which is this immigration center, that's more profit for the ANC Women's League. Right. So we do have a problem. The others, I think, were comments about the importance of a shop floor. As I normally say to people, we can talk about the United Front, we can talk about the politics, but if we can't defend a member who's being fired, we can't defend a member who's being discriminated at work, who's being sexually abused, then the basis of the union is undermined. So that question of union militants is important. I agree with you about internationalism and what we can learn from each other, and we should do that. But, let me put a but. The best internationalism, and again, this is what Lenin said, is to throttle your own bourgeoisie. Yeah. You can learn, you can do all the other things, but the best internationalism, your own one. And sometimes I think, I'm just talking now, the thing about the globalization movement is that you try, that there's a transnational classes and you can try and fight them all over and all of that. And sometimes it's easy to get onto the topical issues and not work on the ground in your own country. Look, I mean, I won't even speak about the differences in electoral system. I think that the party question for me it lies in many questions. The first one is, why do you want a party? What for? What for? Is it for elections? Is it for fundamental transformation of society? The second one, the nature of the party is dependent on class forces in your own country. Let me just make it just an example. In South Africa, you have a working class, mainly black. You also have a lower section of the middle class who haven't benefited from the change or the demise of apartheid. And therefore, their ability to succeed. I'm talking to comrades. Petty traders in the township are being swamped by Walmart. And therefore, the question of which side they can come from, under which leadership, is important. So the question of class forces in a society is very important. The question of the electoral system is another. So I agree with you that, which is why I started that, again, concrete analysis of each situation. What's possible? What do you want to do? And that will give you the program, organizational expression, and all of that. No blueprints. No blueprints. And I just want to emphasize. The thing about co-determination, we are against co-determination. There is, in our law, which was made in 1995, people went to Germany, studied co-determination. There's a chapter 5 of the labor statute about people sitting on boards and all of that. And our view as the South African labor movement is that all those rights about joint decision making, compulsory consultation must be given to unions, not to some works council. We understand the German situation at the end of the World War, how this was part of the compromises made and all of that. We thought that to import the German situation and impose it on South Africa was not. So when we debated the law, we said that the majority union in each workplace must have the option to trigger a workplace forum, which is a co-determination structure. And I can tell you not one single majority union has triggered a workplace forum. So no co-determination. We meet with our comrades from IG Metal. They say, yeah, but the merits of keep that in Germany. We have unions here. We have unions here. So the thing about social unionism, there's a big debate about that, and I was with the professors the other day about where it started. The idea of social unionism, some people, they say, someone called Peter Waterman started it. Some people say it's Eddie Webster in South Africa. It doesn't matter for us unionists where it started. But for us, the idea of social unionism was the idea not just of providing houses and benefits. It was the idea of combining shop floor and community issues. And the simple reason was that you can win a 10% wage increase, but the transport costs go up, the food prices go up, and they start eating on what you've just won. So if you don't fight prices, if you don't fight rent, if you don't fight what happens in the township, you are shooting yourself in the foot. So the idea of social unionism, I know now that here in the US, many academics about social unionism, but it's a very diluted. Social unionism, when it emerged in South Africa, was nothing else. It was mixing union with politics. It was revolutionary trade unionism. Finished. It had nothing to do with all the academic writing about social union movement. I know a lot of people, Professor Voss, and who've written about some of this. But when it originated in South Africa, it was the mixing. You can't separate politics from the economic. The economic and the politics go together. That was there. Ralph, the question of black consciousness, which are organizations like AZAPO, SOPA. AZAPO has been part of the United Front. SOPA, as I told you, has been part of the Conference on Socialism that we called. These are organizations that have been critical of the ANC. We have, from both sides, we have to shed some practices. because those who are coming from Azapo, they said, look, we told you that they will betray you. This is what we told you. And some of us don't take too kindly to that. And there's sometimes the baggage that we come from an ANC tradition. And I think that the question of how we mix this and accommodate each other is going to be important. So let's see. I mean, I have this is what we do. I have a view of a united front that's a 4-story house, where you have a mass organization, membership organization at the top, like unions, social movement, patients organizations. You have a sort of NGOs that may not have a vote, but that are supporting this, because there are a lot of them in South Africa. You may also have a house of political parties that are to the left, like AZAP, SOPA, and all of them. And there's the issue that we're debating about individual membership boards. Sometimes people from other unions who may not be supporting NUMSA, NEHAWU, POPCRU, and all of that, they come and say, look, but comrades, we are with you. But our union is still chained. Now, how do we accommodate for those individual members? We have had people who come from the Communist Party and say, we agree with you, but, you know, where do we fit in? And what we've been doing is to set up all these area committees, residential area committees, where people can join, so that it will be a mix of a sort of a federal type of coalition, but also to cater for the variety of things. But let's talk about it. Let's say a neighbor from Namibia, Economic Freedom Front. For those who don't know, the Economic Freedom Front is an organization that was established in 2013, June. It was the ANC expelled its leadership of its youth wing. And the reason they were expelled is because they said, look, radical economic transformation. The politics are not helping us, radical economic transformation. They were put in trial and they were expelled, and within a few months they set up a party and they won 6.7 seats in the national parliament. And in 3 provinces, they won more than 10%. And in 2 states, they are the official opposition. Wow. So the EFF is a factor. It's attracted many young people. It's attracted a lot of middle-class people. And on many issues, we share a similar perspective with them. There are issues that we have some concerns with them. You see, for all of this work, whether it's in NUMSA or with the EFF, if you want to start something new, please avoid what I call a denominational break.
Right.
Because, you know, the denominational break is this. I don't know, so I'm showing you the church example. You split from this church and from your own church. But you still believe in the same thing.
Yeah.
And some of the problems is that what we've seen is that this is not a break programmatically, politically. It's a denominational break. It's a squabble within the family. And people take some of the baggage into these new organizations. And I say to people, I'm saying it in my own union, if you are interested in a denominational break, that's fine, go ahead. But in 5 years' time, you will be where we are today. We've got to find a different way of doing things.
Right.
And if we don't do that, we're going to be where we be. You can form a new federation, and you've seen a split in the US the unions. You can split and form a new federation. But if there is no cleansing, leave the old tradition, bureaucratic tendencies, it will become the same thing. It may take 5 years, It may take 10 years. It has got to. So that for me is important. No denominational breaks. No denominational breaks. And the problem with the EFF is that sometimes I get a sense that this is a denominational break, and we have criticized them for what we call a very militaristic style. Julius Malema is the commander-in-chief. Now, we unions don't work in that way. Work bottom-up, shop steward, elect, and the democracy and all of that. And this command center that dictates, that deploys, and that disbands branches, that's all part of the ANC and Communist Party traditions. And that we must put in the bin of history.